out with a big kirtan and brought a lot of people back. And in the Arlington Street Church lecture, Prabhupada said, if I was giving this lecture here in the middle of the night and there was nobody here, there would be no Ananda, because Ananda comes from many people enjoying the same thing. So Krishna creates all of us living entities, like a parent creates children to share Ananda, to share happiness. And then in the Arlington Street Church, actually I went with him. I was in the car with him. And we passed by a gas station of Sitco. So the driver, Janardhan, he was from Montreal, he said, Prabhupada said, Sitco. And Janardhan said, that's materialists are, because it's flashes, the materialists are notorious for their advertising, to get attention. So Prabhupada said, everything material is notorious. And in the Arlington Street Church lecture, he was saying how everyone has to accept authority. On anything, you want directions in the street, you have to accept authority. He said, but people foolishly think that you don't need authority for spiritual life, you can just do your own thing. So then, on the way home, we were getting lost, and everybody that Janardhan was asking sent us in the wrong direction. It took us a couple of hours to get back, and Prabhupada turned to us in the back seat and said, see, and they say you don't need authority. And then we passed by this, another time going to another engagement, this lady, Miss Rose, was driving, and we passed by a blind kids' school, where they do Braille, and Prabhupada said we should have a program there, a kirtan program with lecture and prasadam and everything. And Miss Rose said, they have very good ways of educating the blind children. He said, yes, but they have to get the spiritual education as well. So maybe if you know any schools, you could go to.
Helen Keller went to that school, actually.
What?
Helen Keller went to Perkins when it was in South Boston, but it's out in Watertown. Famous school.
Oh yeah, we had so many college engagements with Prabhupada. And Brandeis, Prabhupada was coming up it's like an auditorium, and Prabhupada was on the stage, and then he had to go kind of up a little bit of a hill to get to the back of the auditorium, the seats go down.
Yeah.
So there was this one person who was visiting the temple a lot, and he was in the back row, so he called out to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada stopped as he was going up the aisle. And he said, why do you have the repetition? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And Prabhupada said, because you're calling out, my dear friend, my dear friend, my dear friend. And I was mentioning this, maybe you can, who was ever there last night at the yoga place, if you can share with others about other university programs that I was with Prabhupada.
Did he also speak at MIT?
He spoke at MIT, and it was the most embarrassing thing, because he told me everywhere he wanted me to bring a Sankirtan painting. And I forgot that night. So they had a big thing that the painting was going to be hung on, and it was just like a bare thing stuck right in the middle of his program.
Oh, man.
It was I felt so bad. But yeah, he did speak at MIT, and he was talking about you have to learn spiritual technology as well, technology of the soul, that the body can't function without a soul in it.
Yeah, I'm reading his talk at that. He was asking to say your department for this science and this science. Where's the science of the soul?
Right.
You're
Yeah.
going to die. It was actually quite heavy.
Yeah. And he was, I felt so encouraged because he had me bring out, I made Hare Krishna mantra signs, and the Sankirtan painting, and he had get on an easel on the stage with him. And then he would tell all the students that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates, they were just teenagers, but they started this whole Sankirtan movement. And some of the students went up on stage and was dancing with Prabhupada, and then after the kirtan he said, some of you came up and danced, but the others, I could see your souls dancing in their seats. Any other stimulation from my memory?
I'm told that there was or maybe I read somewhere where on Glenville Avenue at the storefront that a talk by Prabhupada was advertised, and first night it was packed, but he came down very much different moral tone than hippies were used to listening to, young people, and very stern about things. And the next night when he was supposed to speak again, the place was empty. Is that something which...
I don't remember it. I don't remember it. It could have happened, but it's just out of my memory.
Okay.
But you reminded me of some of the things he said when he was giving lectures in Ralston. There was one devotee who later on became Paramananda, and when he joined, he had this afro hairstyle like that. And he said, should I cut my hair? And Gurudev said, no, no need. Yes, do it. The goal is great. And he told a story of this lady whose husband, she was very chaste, and her husband always wanted this prostitute who was very expensive. So the lady, you know, she wasn't angry at her husband, she just tried to facilitate him. She started to work for that prostitute, and so the prostitute got to know her, and finally she made enough money, and then her husband was so nasty, he just went, and she got enough money, and he went to the prostitute. So the prostitute, you know, because he's supposed to give your client dinner first, so she gave him the same preparations, but in different pots, one in a gold pot and one in a brass pot. So he said, why? And she said, first taste it and tell me what you think. So then he tasted it, he said, well, it tastes exactly the same. So she said to him, yes, you're such a rascal that you think sense gratification tastes different in me and in your wife. And then Prabhupada said, it actually tastes exactly the same in the demigods, in the dog, and in the human. Can you see that?
Nice, Prabhupada.
And you know, he's so kind and so encouraging. Some devotees, devotees were coming from different temples, so one devotee gave him a pocket watch. And during the kirtan, he had the pocket watch in his hand, and every once in a while he looked at it just to show that he was accepting. He said, oh, my other one was slow. So he was always so encouraging. Like the first painting, like you saw the painting of Janardhan there, well, that was already like number 5 or 6. But the first painting that I did of, because Prabhupada wanted me to do 24, because there were 24 main Vishnus with the different hand symbols. And Prabhupada wrote on a piece of paper all the names and all where their hand symbol was, like upper right, club, lower right, disc. And so then I had to do all those paintings for the different temples. So anyway, the first one that I did, I tell this story all the time, is the painting was so bad that the hands looked like baseball gloves, and the club looked like an ice cream cone, and the waves looked like psychedelic question marks. So when I finished the painting, as usual, there was a lot of people in this room, and then when I brought in the painting, he said, now who could look at this and say this is not God? So encouraging to the newborn babies. So naturally I thought, yes, I don't know if I can ever do a painting this good again, but I certainly will try for this great personality who loves me so much. That's what encouragement does to the other side, who's the recipient of the encouragement. And I was mentioning, for those of you who are not upstairs, there's that painting, oh, it's right here, of Sitaram. And once I was having a fight with my husband, that's so true. And it was always my fault, he was always really good. And so I came in late to Prabhupada's kirtan. Kirtan was over, and he was doing the Jayadwani, and then everybody was getting up from the Jayadwani. Prabhupada called out to me. I was just coming in the front, and he was in the back on the Vyasasana, and he could have yelled at me because he knows what's on everybody's mind. But instead he called out to me across all the devotees, and he said, "Did you do that painting?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You are already in Vaikuntha." So sometimes when devotees say, "Oh, Prabhupada says so-and-so is a pure devotee, they were an associate of Mahaprabhu in their last life," then I remember how encouraging he is. And it's actually true.
Absolutely, Prabhupada choose you to painting due to your abilities, or?
Definitely not, as you can understand from the first painting. But it used to be so encouraging. So then, a couple of years later, he was more honest, and he said in the beginning, that this was in Boston, at North Beacon Street, when we came to visit him in 1970. He said in the beginning she could not paint, but I was encouraging her, and now she's expert, but I wasn't even expert then. And then in 1976, which is the last time I saw him physically, which was at Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan, he said in the beginning she could not paint, but by Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu the talent came out.
Okay.
So does he tell you like details not to do on the painting, since details like that? Do you have something like a memory, all those things that?
Well, I have a website where the instructions that I got from him, but it only goes up to 1970, with different chastisements, different detailed instructions. But just these days I'm going over my memoirs because I'm doing a coffee table art book. That's why I was taking pictures here, so that Rasamrita can make high resolutions so that I can have them for the art book. The BBT provided a lot, and this one devotee named Pushpavan, do you know him? He gave me also some high-res, but I came to see if there was any other high-res,
We don't have.
others that needed high-res. So, so I got 90 letters from Prabhupada, and in many of them he gave so many instructions. Like I was just reading today, it was 1973, and me and the other artists were doing different paintings for the different cantos, and so he would write us letters about what things looked like. Like one, I was doing for the third canto, Devahudi being decorated, the same Devahudi that you showed me, that's upstairs. She was being, the painting that comes right after that, she was being decorated by her 1,000 maidservants in a lake that her husband had created by his mystic powers. So I asked Prabhupada, well, by letters, how can that be that it all happened underwater? Was there an airtight house underneath the water? So Prabhupada said, wrote me back, no, just as one can learn the art of living in the house of air, one can learn the mystic art of living in a house of water. So that's why we made her with fishes passing by, and she's being decorated. And one painting that I did in New York, Prabhupada hated so much that he said this should be ripped out of every book. Probably after that we started sending him sketches. It was the Rasa Leela, and even if something is in his book, it doesn't mean we still don't need his extra guidance, because in his book he said that the gopis' saris were becoming loosened, and the gopis' hair and Krishna's hair was flying all over the place. And in Nectar of Devotion it says that Krishna's hair was so long it looked like that he was being embraced by the goddess of fortune. So I made this long wild hair on everybody and saris loosening, and Prabhupada said it should be ripped out of every book. He said I liked the one that Devahudi did of the in the Krishna book, where everybody's very sedate So I got a lot